On April 24th, 2024, the reviews for PS5's new game, Stellar Blade, were released. It's in the 80s on Metacritic, and while there are some definite faults, it seems like there's a lot to like. The reception of the game seems pretty good, or so I thought, because since then, ravenous fans have been attacking reviewers with all sorts of absurd claims and insults. Apparently, the game getting anything other than a 10 out of 10 across the boards is not acceptable. Now, Stellar Blade itself has a lot of weird toxicity around it that I don't really want to engage with, honestly. But I think the way people are responding to these reviews is telling of an issue much larger than Stellar Blade itself. One of the companies taking the biggest hit right now is IGN, who gave the game a 7. Based on IGN's review scale, a 7 is defined as a good game, yet for some reason, fans always seem to act as though 7 is a bad score. It's a representation of how toxic and out of touch this community has become in regards to how we judge games and their reviews. This has been an issue that's been building for many years, and I feel like we are reaching the breaking point. When I look at this issue, I see three major parties pushing this. Some of them are doing it unintentionally, but they are still adding to the problem. The three main culprits I have identified are IGN, Metacritic, and the gaming community themselves. First, let's talk about IGN. IGN is one of the longest running gaming media companies in the world, focusing on gaming news, reviews, and walkthroughs. On the surface, IGN doesn't do anything that is all too out of the ordinary. It's pretty typical stuff you would expect from any gaming media company. However, IGN has become very infamous among the gaming community, often being the butt of jokes and the target of hate threads. Now in my head, IGN is just the place I used to go to watch Greg Miller and Colin Moriarty. But for most people, they know IGN for their reviews. IGN's reviews go much farther back than you may think, with the first review on their website being Pilot Wing 64 nearly 30 years ago. IGN is also well known for their video reviews, which go back as far as 15 years ago. Obviously, IGN is far from the first company to make reviews, but I do feel like they were one of the first to transition it into the modern age of content creation. And many of the online reviews we see today follow the same formula that IGN set in place all those years ago. The reviews feature a general overview of the game, goes over the positives and negatives, and finally, the review ends with a score. And this score never fails to send people into a frenzy. No matter how IGN scores a game, there are always people there ready to complain. Either they think the score is too low or they think it's too high. And many people will look to other reviews IGN has made to say why a certain score is or isn't fair, but this displays a general lack of understanding of what IGN is or how it works. IGN is a mega corporation with over 200 employees. Hundreds of different people have written reviews for IGN over the decades, and that's why much of the criticism towards IGN's reviews is often unfair. It's so common to see someone say, IGN gave this game a 9 but only gave this game a 7. How does that make any sense? Meanwhile, two completely different people wrote those reviews. So you really can't point to that as a gotcha moment or a sign that something is wrong with their system because it's two different people with two different lines of thinking. Now, I'm not saying IGN reviews are perfect. There are many legitimately bad moments, with some head-scratching opinions and scores that have been put out there. IGN also does play a role in these controversies by posting review scores on their Twitter without showing the full context of the review. They are well aware that this will always garner a lot of attention and impressions, even if it causes a lot of negativity towards the game or the reviewer. But at the same time, I think a lot of the hate IGN gets actually falls back on the viewer and how they consume and interpret the content. In the case of Stellar Blade, people seem angry that the game only scored a 7, but as I mentioned earlier, based on IGN's definition of their review scale, a 7 means that the game is good. In their own words, playing a good game is time well spent. Could it be better? Absolutely. Maybe it lacks ambition, has a few technical bumps in the road, or is too repetitive, but we came away from it happy nonetheless. We think you will too. A 7 on IGN's scale means that the game is good and that they recommend it. Yet for some reason, 7 has become the new death score, the new score that means a game is bad and has disappointed. I don't fully understand how this happened, but I do think Metacritic has a lot to do with it. Metacritic is an aggregate review site founded in 2001, specializing in movies, television, music, and of course, video games. To put it simply, Metacritic takes all of the reviews of a product and averages it out on their site. For example, they took 119 critic reviews of Uncharted 4 and averaged them out, leaving Uncharted 4 with a 93 on Metacritic. Metacritic is an extremely helpful tool when wanting to know how a game is being received. It's a lot easier than tracking down hundreds of different reviews to try and figure out how people feel about a game. This can also make reviews easier to interpret since every site has slightly different review scales such as 1 through 5, 1 through 10, or 1 through 100. This can get kind of confusing at times, but Metacritic automatically places all reviews on a 100 scale, which is very helpful. Unfortunately, Metacritic has also become increasingly toxic over the last several years to no fault of their own. Metacritic has seemingly become the be-all end-all for gamers. Some gamers seem more interested in how a game scores on Metacritic than they are in actually playing the game itself. At the end of the day, Metacritic is a platform that should help inform you of the general reception of the game. It shouldn't be somewhere you go to base your entire opinion on the game. So many people go on Metacritic, look at the score, and if they see anything below an 80, they assume the game is terrible. That's so far off from the truth, and I feel it has caused a big disconnect. I mentioned how Metacritic is helpful because you don't have to go digging for all the different reviews that are out there. I stand by this, but it does cause some issues as well, mainly in the sense that much of the context of the review scores are completely lost, and it just boils down to the number itself. On top of that, the way Metacritic grades certain ratings may differ from what the original reviewer intended. Stellar Blade's review is a perfect example of this. I mentioned how IGN's scale says a 7 is good, but on Metacritic's scale, anything below a 74 is labeled as mixed or average. This means IGN's 7 gets labeled as mixed when they intended it to mean good. Gamers see that yellow square instead of a green one and treat the game like it's ET on the Atari. Listen, in many ways, I do enjoy Metacritic. I spent a lot of time going through different games just to see what scores they get. It's fun and it's helpful, but Metacritic is a flawed platform, and to see it be treated as gospel not just by gamers but also gaming companies themselves is very concerning to me. I guess on that topic I should talk about the last group at fault here, and that is the gaming community itself. I have noticed a growing obsession with reviews over the last several years. Sometimes I feel like I hear more about the reviews of a new game than I hear about the game itself, and the toxicity around game reviews has gotten out of control as well. Game reviews are meant to serve very specific purposes. They can warn you to not buy a game if it's outrageously bad, or they could convince you to buy a game if they say it's fantastic. But ultimately, it's not really supposed to be much more than that. You don't need to get offended because one reviewer didn't like a game as much as you did. At the same time, I wish this community took public reviews more seriously. I'm talking about things like Metacritic user scores and Steam reviews. Metacritic user scores have been a cesspit for years. Almost any game you look up has been review bombed at some point with hateful comments. Metacritic has no way to verify those players even own the game, and I honestly feel like they should have just gotten rid of this feature a long time ago. Steam reviews, on the other hand, have also become increasingly toxic lately. I feel like every week there's a new game getting review bombed on Steam for anything being slightly wrong, like microtransactions requiring de novo or requiring you to launch the Epic Games Store. These things are genuine concerns, but I don't think they warrant hate brigades. And ultimately, acting so outraged at every little thing takes away the validity of genuine complaints when real, serious issues arrive. I guess my point is that in general, it has started to feel like the way we talk about games online, whether it be on Twitter, YouTube, Reddit, or others, has become so incredibly negative all the time. Every game has a controversy, every game gets review bombed, every game gets called dead if it loses even 1% of its player base. We sit on Twitter and have threads about how Cloud doesn't look wet after going into water in Rebirth, or we spam IGN's comment feed because their review of a game we like was 1 point lower than we wanted. The online gaming community is full of people who claim to be gamers, but I'm not sure if any of them even like gaming at all. I often wish we could go back to the days where we walked into a GameStop, looked around the shelves for a new game we hadn't seen before, and took it home to play it and form our own opinions. That's not possible anymore with social media hovering over our daily lives and with new information being constantly fed to us. It concerns me for the future of gaming, I'm not gonna lie, because I do feel like we are reaching a breaking point. I'm not trying to shame anyone who makes game reviews or consumes game reviews. Game reviews do have a place and they're important, especially with how expensive games are. Like I said, the concept of a game review is not the problem. The problem is the way they are being interpreted and the power we have given them. If you're still watching the video at this point, I imagine something about my message here has resonated with you. And if that's true, I would urge you to come away with one final plea. Just try to enjoy games again. Forget the online discourse and the narratives. Buy games that you think you will enjoy and form your own opinions. If you love a game, don't let someone ruin that for you because they don't like the way the grass physics are. This industry is in a tough place right now, and the way the community has been acting is not helping. Me personally, I've had enough of debating video games online. It's time to actually play video games again, and I hope that some of you will do the same.